I always thought I had the perfect life. Seriously, if you had seen me a few years ago, you'd probably say I was the definition of a dream marriage. Brandon and I were that couple everyone admired. 10 years together, a house in the suburbs, romantic dinners, plans for the future. Everything seemed to fit perfectly. I had left my teaching career to take care of our home and support him in his business, and I never regretted it. I truly believed we were building something solid, something that would last forever. But then, things started to change. Brandon was spending more and more time away. He always had an excuse: meetings, business trips, networking events. I trusted him, so I never questioned it. Until one day, while tidying up his coat, I found a hotel receipt. Just a simple slip of paper with a name I didn't recognize: Clara. My stomach turned instantly, but I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe she was a client, a coworker, anything but what I feared the most. When he got home, I showed him the receipt. He hesitated, avoided my eyes, and then finally he admitted it. And it wasn't just the affair. He also told me he had sold the house. Our house. The place where I thought we would grow old together. He used the money to buy a luxury apartment downtown, where he planned to move in with her. I couldn't believe it. It felt like the ground had disappeared from under me. Just like that, I was alone. No home, no money, no direction. And worst of all, I had no idea what to do next. How do you start over at 38 with nothing but a broken heart and a million unanswered questions? In those first few days, all I could think about was how everything had fallen apart. I had dedicated my life to Brandon, to our marriage, and in the end, he tossed me aside like I was disposable. I had to find a way to move forward, even if I didn't know where to begin. And that's how it all started. With a hotel receipt, a betrayal, and my world collapsing. But looking back now, I see that rock bottom was exactly where I found the strength to start over. In the months that followed, I found myself in a place I never imagined I'd be. Alone, in a tiny apartment, working as a waitress at a cafe. It was a job that barely covered my bills, but I didn't have many options. My days were an endless routine of serving coffee, wiping down tables, and trying not to think about everything I had lost. At night, I drowned myself in TV shows and books, anything to keep my mind off the pain. I was on autopilot, just existing, not really living. Until one day, something changed. I was serving coffee to a customer, a woman in her 40s, well-dressed, confident. She was on the phone, and I couldn't help but overhear bits of her conversation. She was talking about how she had rebuilt her life after a devastating divorce, how she had found the strength to start her own business and create something for herself. It caught me off guard. I didn't know this woman, but somehow her story hit me deep. When she hung up, I walked over and asked if she could tell me more about how she did it. She looked at me, a little surprised, but then she smiled and started talking. She told me about a mentorship program for women who wanted to start their own businesses, about workshops, courses, and a community of people supporting each other. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that woman and how she had turned her pain into something positive. I wondered if I could do the same. I had no idea where to start, but something inside me told me I had to try. The next day, I looked up the mentorship program and signed up. It was a small step, but it was the first one I had taken towards something more than just survival. The program was a wake-up call. I found myself surrounded by incredible women, each with their own story of resilience. Some had lost everything. In divorces, others were trying to reinvent themselves after years of dedicating their lives to their families. At first, I felt like an outsider. I had no business experience, no knowledge of entrepreneurship, but I was determined to learn. And that's when I discovered something about myself. I had a vision that no one else had. While the other women talked about plans and strategies, I started seeing opportunities where no one else was looking. One day, during a workshop, I had an idea. I had always loved handmade things, products crafted with care and dedication, and I realized there was a market for it, but no one was approaching it the right way. That's how I started sketching out a plan to launch my own online store for handmade products. I had no money, no connections, but I had an idea. And for the first time in a long time, I had hope. Of course, it wasn't easy. I was still working at the cafe, still living in my tiny apartment, but now I had a goal. Something that was mine. Something no one could take away from me. And little by little, I started reconnecting with the person I used to be before everything fell apart. But even with this newfound motivation, I was still scared. Scared of failing, scared of not being good enough. The difference was that this time, I decided I wouldn't let fear stop me. I was going to move forward one step at a time, and that's how my journey began. That first year was a whirlwind. I had the idea, the plan, but putting everything into action was a whole different story. I didn't have money to invest, so I started with the basics, a simple website, a few handmade products, and a whole lot of social media promotion. I stayed up late learning about digital marketing and even how to take decent product photos. I was still working at the cafe during the day, so my routine was basically waking up early, rushing to work, coming home exhausted, and then spending hours focused on my online store. So many times I thought about giving up. It was exhausting, frustrating, and sometimes I wondered if it was even worth it. But then I'd remember that one customer who inspired me, the mentor who believed in me and the other women in the program who were fighting just as hard as I was. That gave me the strength to keep going. My first few sales were a huge relief. It felt like I had won the lottery. But, of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some customers complained about the products, some orders got lost in the mail, and there were days when I didn't sell a single thing. But I learned to see it as part of the process. I couldn't control everything, but I could control how I responded to it. Little by little, the store started to grow. I began receiving orders from other cities, then from other states, and eventually, even from other countries. I couldn't believe that something I had created was reaching so many people. But of course, life always finds a way to test you. Just when things were starting to go right, I got news that almost knocked me down again. Brandon showed up. Yes, him, the guy who had turned my life upside down. He came to me, full of regret, saying he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He was having financial problems. His relationship with the woman he left me for had fallen apart, and now he wanted a second chance. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Indifference? I had spent so much time trying to get over him, and now he was standing right in front of me, asking to come back. But at the same time, I wasn't the same person he had left behind. I had built something of my own, something no one could take away from me. And I knew I couldn't just let him walk back in and erase everything I had worked for. So I did something even I didn't expect. I didn't give him a second chance as my husband, but I did offer him a job. I needed help with the store, and he needed work. It was a tough decision, but it felt like the right one. He accepted, of course, but I made it clear. Things wouldn't be like before. He would have to start from the ground up, just like I did. It was strange having him back in my life, even in a completely different way. I didn't know if he was truly sorry or just desperate, but I decided I wasn't going to let him mess up what I had built. I had a store to run, customers to serve, and a future to build. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Having Brandon back in my life, even just as an employee, was one of the strangest things I had ever experienced. In the first few days, I avoided direct contact with him. I didn't want him to think I was giving in, that I was forgiving everything he had done, but at the same time, I knew he was trying. He showed up early, did his job without complaining, and even suggested ideas to improve the store. It was hard not to notice that he was making an effort, but I couldn't just forget the past. Every time he was around, I remembered the betrayal, the house he sold, the way he left me with nothing. I had built an emotional armor, but he still managed to poke at wounds I thought had healed. And at the same time, I didn't want to be the person who held on to resentment forever. It was a constant internal battle. The store, on the other hand, was doing better than ever. Sales were increasing every month, and I was finally able to hire more people to help. I even managed to rent a small physical space to serve as our office and storage. It was incredible to see something I had built from scratch grow like that. But with growth came new challenges, logistical problems, competition, pressure to innovate. It was a lot for one person to handle. That's when Brandon proved he was truly willing to change. He started taking on more responsibilities, solving problems without me having to ask, and even brought in ideas that helped the store grow even more. I didn't want to admit it, but he was becoming an important part of the business. And little by little, I started to see a different person from the one who had betrayed me. He was more humble, more grateful, and he seemed genuinely sorry. But I couldn't let that distract me. I had a bigger goal. The store was just the beginning. I wanted to create something that would impact the lives of other women, to show them that starting over was possible, no matter how hard it seemed. And for that, I needed to stay focused. Brandon might have been trying, but I couldn't forget that he was the reason I had to start over in the first place. The final test came when we received an investment proposal. A major businessman had discovered the store and wanted to buy a share of the business. It was an incredible opportunity, but also a huge risk. I would have to give up part of my control, and that scared me. Brandon, on the other hand, thought it was the perfect chance to expand. He argued that we could reach so many more people, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. That's when I realized how much I had changed. Before, I would have let Brandon make the decision for me. I would have trusted him blindly, like I always had. But now I knew the decision was mine. I turned down the offer. I decided I wanted to keep moving at my own pace, keeping control over every part of the business. It was a tough decision, but I knew it was the right one for me. Brandon respected my decision, and that surprised me. He kept working with me, but now I saw him differently. He was no longer the man who had destroyed my life, but he also wasn't the same Brandon I had once loved. He was just someone trying to make things right, just like I was trying to move forward. Time passed, and the store kept growing. It was surreal to think that it all started with a hotel note and a broken heart. Brandon kept working with me, and over time our relationship became functional. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't romance, just two people trying to build something good together. He never brought up the idea of us getting back to what we used to be, and I was grateful for that. I had moved on, and he finally seemed to understand that there was no space for us in that way anymore. He was there, doing his job, and I was focused on the future. But the future I wanted wasn't just about the store. I wanted to do something that truly made an impact on people's lives, especially women's lives. That's when I had the idea to start a non-profit organization to help women who were starting over after divorces, trauma, or anything else that had knocked them down. I wanted to offer emotional support and even resources so they could reinvent themselves, just like I did. When I told Brandon about it, he surprisingly supported the idea. He even suggested using part of the store's profits to help fund the project. It was one of those rare moments when I felt like he truly understood what I was trying to do. It wasn't just about business. It was about changing lives, and that's exactly what I did. The organization grew quickly. Women of all ages and backgrounds started joining the programs we created. I saw stories of resilience, of strength, and it filled me with pride. Brandon kept working with me, but now in a smaller role. He had found his place, and I had found mine. We weren't husband and wife anymore, and we weren't just co-workers. We were two people who had learned to respect each other and move forward, each in our own way. And in the end, I realized that my biggest triumph wasn't the success of the store or even founding the organization. It was learning to put myself first, to believe that I deserved more, and to turn my pain into something that could help others. I didn't need revenge or a cliché happy ending. I just needed myself. Now, when I look back, I see that everything that happened was necessary. The betrayal, the pain, the restart, it all led me to where I am today. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Because in the end, I didn't just survive. I was reborn.